Hey everyone, welcome to the channel, and welcome back to the city of Dewy del Mar, our ongoing series here in Cities Skylines 2. Today we're heading back down to the coast to build a small port town, something a little weathered, a little sleepy, but still full of charm. It's the kind of place that's seen better days, but the vibes are great and the locals wouldn't live anywhere else. With that in mind, we'll use content from the latest patch and a few new mods to shape out an old working harbor and ferry terminal, breathe some life into a worn down but cozy commercial strip, and expand the suburbs just a bit farther into the hills. As always, if you're enjoying the series, please consider liking the video so others can find it, and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on the next episode. But with all that out of the way, let's begin. Alright, so we're back in the suburbs today, and I'm going to briefly go over some of the content from the latest patch that I'm going to use in today's build, as well as one more mod that I've added to the list that I think will bring a lot of life to our new harbor area here. For the patch, we have two main things, I think. We have these quay walls, both pedestrian and car variety, but this first one has a nice stone facade when you zoom in. Looks pretty nice. My personal favorite, though, is the one with the ribbed columns, just because I think that's a little visually more striking from a distance, and so we'll definitely use some of these in our harbor area today. But even cooler, in my opinion, is the new wooden piers, which are leisure piers, and so you will see people kind of walking to and fro on these. They got props built in, so those look great. 10 times better than the custom ones I made over by Fisherman's Terminal, which you might recall are individual benches, and so I don't even want to know how much RAM these are eating up in my CPU. You just saw my frame rate drop probably, but I think off screen I'll go and replace the bajillion benches we have over there in Fisherman's Terminal, as well as the custom one we made. Same setup over by the university. That's just so many benches. Okay, let's go back to Port Angeles. Get rid of that. The mod I'm going to use, though, is called More Water Transportation by Washi776. And this is basically just a ferry, and it's freaking awesome. They have these transport piers now. And what we can do is we'll bring this out into the water, and then if we go to the water tab in our transportation setup here, I can put oh no, it's actually integrated right in there. So what we could do is if I build another one of these piers, which I will, I can do a boat line from here. I'm thinking we're gonna place one right in the heart of downtown so we have a nice ferry system going to and from Port Angeles, which I think would be pretty cool. And we can use these very small seaways for that. But that'll all be part of the harbor. And I definitely wanna get that because Port Angeles, kind of the namesake here, has a ferry terminal itself. So figured let's stay true to the inspiration. I'm going to start by reorienting the grid in Port Angeles, though, because you can see the zoning tiles are just all over the place. So let's bring back everything here. And no, I will not use the grid tool because it is still pretty much useless, in my opinion. And then I'm going to turn these sides, the insides of Lindbergh and whatever that was, into quay walls so we can focus all the zoning on our grid. All right, for the main collector going straight through here, this is where I want to focus all of our commercial activity. So I'm going to get a 4-laner with parking. And the challenge today will be to maintain this grid somehow. Wow, look at that. That's pretty easy. Nice. All right, let's get a 2-lane road going right down the center. And I'm going to do blocks of 56 units deep. And yes, our road hierarchy is breaking down a little bit by attaching these alleyways to the arterials, but I mean, this is the small town vibes we're going for, so I'm okay with trying to maintain the grid as much as possible. I'm gonna leave these 2 blocks open just so we don't have as many intersections along this stretch of Daffodil Street, but I do want to extend one more block this way. And what I like to do for harbors or ports and piers and stuff is just bring out the land entirely. Just because it's easier to trace the roads and stuff on flat land and then bring it back than to try to do it over water. And that's just kind of like a game mechanic. It's not, obviously this is not super realistic, but I think this will just make our job a little easier. And let's buy up a couple of tiles into the water. In fact, let's just do all this. But all right, let's extend this. In fact, I want to kind of bring back that intersection's fine, but let's make this come a little more into the middle there. And this is a narrow 4-lane road that I've made with Road Builder. And now we can trace out the inside of the harbor. So I'm going to begin by getting another 2-lane road coming down from this central intersection here. I'm thinking this is where the ferry pier will come out. But let's go out a little bit farther. We'll do 72 meters because I want to get a road with parking facing the water there for some epic views. We'll come out to there. Let's line up with that intersection here. Now I'm going to create one more target for the curvature right around here. On this side, I imagine it's mostly going to be industrial shipping stuff, so I'm going to stick with an alleyway, and then we'll trace out some shipping piers on the inside there. I'll keep the alleyways there, but I am going to cover pretty much everything with this light pavement, so we won't see all of these kind of crisscrossy alleyways there. Before we move to the other side though, I'm going to finish off this coastline with our first pedestrian quay. So let's get the land out coming around here. And I know the new quay walls kind of have this snap to coastline option, but honestly, I find it a little difficult to work with just because it won't maintain the elevation then. You can see how it kind of rises in the middle there. It looks a little weird. Honestly, I find the same old trick of drawing on land, turning into a quay wall, and then bringing the land back still 10 times easier. So let's get our ribbed variety here. Come off from here. And now we can curve along the coast. And so next we turn this side into quay walls, and it'll actually bring back the water for us a little bit. Yep, just like that. And there you go, you got ribbed quay walls. Obviously we'll do a little cleanup here, but then later we can do a similar treatment for any other quay walls we do on the inside. For the roads though, I am not going to turn those into quay walls because I kind of want a dirtier look, not dirtier is the wrong word, but a more rugged look, I think. If you look at pictures of Port Angeles and other small port towns, you'll see that they have like riprap and dirt going right up to the road. It's not a clean cement wall, and so that's kind of what I want to recreate here. For this part of the harbor, we're going to take an idea from Snowball.3.1, who suggested placing an historical tram line along the coast here that back in the day would have transported lumber between Discovery Park, which we can say was like a lumber yard, all the way down to the harbor to be shipped out. But at some point when the lumber industry failed, or at least downsized, this became a more touristy tram line to transport people back and forth between Port Angeles and Discovery Park. And I just love the idea of converting aged infrastructure into something more touristy, kind of like what we did with the High Line, or the High Line lookalike over in Uptown way back when. So my idea is we're going to get the small tram depot, place it around here. We'll have some remnants of the tracks still going out to the piers and even to like a lumber storage yard here. But then we'll have a stop right by Daffodil Street and then a little loop-de-loop by the parking lot here. I'll probably also bring back the pedestrian path a little bit so the tram line will snake up around here to eventually meet the parking lot. So let's bring the terrain out back to the parking lot, or the parkway. And I'm going to use this zoning block as kind of the edge here. So I'll place an alleyway at the very end, and this is what the depot will connect to. We can even say that this is kind of like one of the outside edges of the harbor. So let's place this down right there. And I used Road Builder to create a more narrow variety of the tramway. Basically this, but without the shoulders or the overhead wires. So, well, yeah, we'll just snake it around here. Let's get a flat platform, though, along the coast. And then we'll start sloping up, maybe like around there. Okay, let's place down this tram track. From here, I'm going to go down to a one-way loop, and then we'll, yeah, loop around like that. Okay, so we got our loop, and all we need to do to make this functional is plop down an actual tram stop. We'll do it right here, and then we got to connect it with an invisible pedestrian path, but later we will actually detail this up, make it look a little nicer. Okay, so that's the park station. Let's go back over here. And we'll have a couple of branches, one going off into an eventual pier here, kind of like an old remnant of the tram line, or the lumber line. And then a few more branches coming into here, which is where the lumber will be stored. But then we're going to do a terminus station here by Daffodil Street, and this is the one where we'll place the other side of the tram line. That's where people can hop on and go Discovery Park. I think it would be easier if we finish the road layout of the harbor first, because that'll dictate where the tram lines go. So let's get this parking road right here. You can use the picker tool, and we'll come off. Let's go out to around that intersection there, but make sure the parking spots face the water in all its glory. And I'm going to grab this two-way alley with sidewalk, come off at a 90 from right around here, and this should be plenty of room to slip a tram line through. But I'm choosing this road builder road because it's the same sidewalk width as the parking road right here, so when we actually merge it in, you'll see that the sidewalks blend pretty seamlessly. And it is now Elmhurst Street. Great. Ooh, things are slowing down. That was weird. All right, let's continue this tram line, and I might have to work with the angles here to get the node to play nicely with the intersection of Moonflower Lane there. But let's grab our two-laner tram. We'll start around here, bring it down there. And then, yeah, I'm thinking maybe like this should be the target like that. Actually, will that look okay? Yeah, I think it looks fine. Let's do one more branch off into our eventual pier though. That was easier than I thought. I'm going to do a couple more branches into our logging area, and again, those were like remnants of when they had excess trees and they needed a place to store them. So to make this easier, I'm going to turn the parkway, or at least this side, into quay walls, and that might also fix, yeah, some weird terrain stuff around the depot. Let's grab, I'm going to do the one-way tram track, because as we'll see, I'm going to place just like an aesthetic tram stop there, and that'll get rid of the notification icons. But we'll do a couple of right angles like this. And if I place a stop on either one, voila, the notifications go away. And we can do the same treatment for this pier version. We won't place actual lines to those stops, but at least it gets rid of the notification. All right, let's complete the one that goes to our actual stop. So we'll come off right around here. All right, that looks a little better. And now I'm going to replace this segment with our handy dandy one-way track. I don't know if we actually need power lines. I'm not sure what difference that makes, but we'll place our stop here. And there you go. We can actually make our tram line now. To hide this though, I'm going to grab a static ploppable of a northeastern low-density commercial. Let's grab the big one. Yeah, here. We'll get it in the corner. And then so it's not going into a blank wall, I'm gonna grab an agricultural shed, this one right here. And then it looks like it's actually going into a tunnel. Okay, pretty cool. Nice, so now we can actually make the tram line that'll take people between Port Angeles and Discovery Park. But all right, now we can finally finish the rest of our piers. What I'm thinking is this outer one here will end where the road ends, but I'll extend a big breakwater to protect the inner harbor, which itself will hold from this intersection a transport pier. And again, this is from the More Water Transport mod from Walshy 776. And that's where a functional ferry will dock. And I'm thinking it'll go out to where Bodie McBoatface right now is docked. This Garnett Street, I'm gonna replace this with a wooden pier just to get some variety in all the quay walls we have out there. So back in Port Angeles, I'm gonna extend an alleyway from here, but first let's downgrade that single stretch of double track to a single track. Looks a little weird, I think, having just that short stub of double track there. But here, let's get an alleyway now and come off at a 90. Think 56 ought to do it, sure. So this is where the parking lots and factories will be, but let's extend the breakwater now. And so that's where the ships will slip through. And I'm going to keep this as a regular alleyway so the terrain stays attached to it. And that just makes adding riprap along it a heck of a lot easier than using quay walls or the new pier roads. I also want to get like a triangular bit here just to increase the surface area and also to make it easier for, I guess, more docking area for ships. So they don't have to have like two lined up here. You can have them at angles. So let's get it right around, sure, there. And we'll come off at a 45 degree. What is that? Isosceles? Is that what we call it? But instead of having these ships attached directly to the road, I want to get, we'll do a medium wooden leisure pier. So we'll come off at like a 90 like this, ever so slightly. And this is basically just like a buffer zone, I guess. So the ship isn't banging up against the quay wall itself. I'm curious, can I attach this to this angle road? What will that look like? Absolute garbage. Can I play with Move It, maybe? Maybe not. I think it's okay. We'll just leave that be. But yeah, this is where the ships will actually come up against. So let's get to our ferry dock now. What I'm thinking is let's have the transport pier itself come right from the intersection. And we'll get out pretty far. And then on this side, since we've got some open space, I'm thinking let's actually downgrade this stretch of the road to something like the rest of Elmhurst here, because we're going to have a bit of reclaimed land that itself hosts a parking lot. So we'll do that and apparently mess up the pier there. Come on. All right, I ended up just coming off from an angle from this street right here before going straight out. I think it looks a ton better. So on this side is where I want to get the commuter parking lot. I'm going to use the medium density lot for that. So let's attach this right around here. I'm not going to go directly against the pier because you might be able to see in the shadows. It's going to like mess up the parking decals. So we will have a pedestrian path in between. But I'm also going to come off from an angle there so we have a little room to zone like an ice cream shop on the pier there. So I'm going to use, this new ribbed variety attached to the side here. And let's come off at an angle. Again, it is kind of weird where the cement block appears if you actually attach it, so we're going to have to do something like this. That's okay. And now we can come straight down here. Excellent, so I'm going to use the key wall tool to turn the outside edge into keys. And hopefully that doesn't mess up the decals. Yep, they're all there. Excellent, so we'll use like a static ploppable with maybe one of our modular zoning blocks to get some kind of shop in there, but we can extend our surface at least. Actually, you know what? That surface is bland. Let's replace it with, I downloaded new concrete surfaces from Elgato 87. So let's get this, this kind of blocked one. You may notice that I don't have the area bucket tool right now either. Last I checked, that was incompatible with the latest game patch, so I did disable that. Maybe not. You know, I'm gonna go for this concrete stripped light, see how this looks. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, nice and bright. Now for this ice cream shop, I'm gonna use a static ploppable of, this public market one northeastern variety. And we might have to shift things around, but let's make sure it's not impinging upon the pedestrian path there. We have a little bit more room here. I'm gonna pause it before I use move it, as always. Can I just maybe move the parking a little bit? Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's so cool. And to make this even better, I'm gonna use the modular zoning blocks. Let's do, so these do need road access, so I can't do it from here, but you know what, let's do high density. If I do a 1x6, I should be able to reach the street out there. Look at that, that's perfect. Nice. All right, now we got a functioning public market square on our pier. That's so cool. So let's make this thing actually functional now. For that, I'm gonna finally bring back the rest of our terrain, because then we can create a narrow seaway through which our ferries will come, and then we also have to build a boat depot. So I'm gonna bring this all the way back. Okay, water is slowly trickling through, so now we gotta get a boat depot. And I'm thinking, let's attach it to this pier right here, since we got some space on the inside. I'm gonna actually do something like this, where it's coming off of Ashford Lane, just so we're not eating too much into there. Excellent, so let's attach our very small seaway. We gotta have one come to the pier itself. And now we gotta attach to our other pier. So let's have this come out through the breakwater, out into the great beyond, and let's swing this around. And so now we have the enviable task of replacing this with another transport pier. So I'm gonna get rid of all these props. We got plenty of props on Pike Place there. And I forgot that I named it that. Love it. And the good news is the wooden pier has props on it already, so we still get some variety. Don't delete Bodie McBoatface. All right, transport pier, here we go. Oh, this is gonna look like crap. All right, you know what? I'm gonna replace this road as well with a wooden pier. That way we can have the main transport pier come off from a 90 there. Got floating props. All right, so props are still on the pier. This, unfortunately, is probably like due to something about the quay wall nature. I'm okay with that. A little imperfection's fine. But we could even turn this into another street with parking. And now from here, this is where I'm gonna get the transport pier. So let's come off straight through there. We're still attaching to Bodie McBoatface's little ladder there. I can raise that up, and I'll use the regular pier to actually get this to the road. And use a little move it to make that look better. Okay, after 20 minutes of messing around, I think I got this in a better spot. I have the pier flush against Summit Street now, and then clean up the node madness around Pike Place there. But now that everything's in place, we can extend our very small seaway, and just needs to go, I think, underneath the pier. And then if we double check that, yep, that's under there. So boat line, look at that. We have a kiosk on both ends. And we now have a passenger ferry between Port Angeles and the wharf. That is so cool. Any second, I bet we're gonna see a boat coming out of our boat depot as well. And hopefully this water level rises as everything comes in. Look at that. Oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to see people kind of congregate at the end of the pier there. All right, obviously some kinks to work out here. I wonder if I can move the sea lane to the side of it to make it a little better, but more importantly, I'm a little worried that I made the terrain of the harbor a little too high. I see that the water line, I think the white line is sea level, so hopefully the water physics is just taking forever and that this will fill up eventually. I mean, it's definitely higher over there, so it kind of looks like it's moving in. If not, we will cross that bridge when we get there. Maybe I'll just lower the boat depot and the pier here so you don't have this going on where you're like 10 feet below the pier there. But regardless, I think we're ready to start filling in the pier. So let's start over in this one. This will definitely be industrial. And so will this one. And then around here by Daffodil Street, we'll do commercial and stuff. And again, this will be the lumber storage area, I think. So over here, I'm going to stick with the concrete stripped light surface that we did over by the parking lot. So it's all uniform. And I'm actually going to bring it on top of the road here so we don't have this weird kind of bifurcation of surfaces. Yeah, it looks a little weird, but the great part is since I have road wear adjuster setting the road wear lines to be darker, those will pop up on top of the concrete surface. So it'll still look like we have wear and tear lines on top of the pavement here. Yeah, so the road wear lines still show up, and I think it looks a lot better. Obviously, we'll get like some fences and stuff, but once we add riprap and bushes and stuff, make it look a little grittier, I think this edge will look better. So now I'm going to zone in. Let's get a big factory in this giant block here. We'll do a single factory on this side, and then I'm going to get a narrow strip of parking. More factories there. I'm just going to do a single small one here. One thing I've noticed on Google Earth a lot is that these giant piers, I don't know if I would call them giant, but the piers have a bunch of open space for storage and for trucks to maneuver around, kind of offload shipping crates and stuff. So I do want to leave these open. We will obviously get a bunch of decals and maybe even a couple of vehicle props to take up the space there. But what I want to do, just to kind of showcase the power of decals and making something look 10 times more realistic, is add some stain and these new wet stain mods or decals. And this is from El Gendo or El Gendo 87. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And I'm pretty sure I said Elgato a couple of minutes ago. And I think that's like a WordPress theme, so my bad. It is El Gendo or El Gendo 87. But yeah, we have these wet effects, basically puddle decals. That's a better word for it. And I think this is perfect for a pier area because obviously we are by the water. The boats, when they come in to be maintained or something, they're going to leak water. So get a couple of those by the boat depot and like the roads here. We even have like oil decals now. So something from the boat depot is leaking oil. Same for people driving along Ashford Lane there. And am I going overboard? Maybe a little bit. I just want to like illustrate the fact that these decals are awesome. I mean, just look at that versus this blank pier here, and that looks 10 times better. Or at least I think so. Maybe it's a little too much, but you get the point. I'm going to do the similar treatment to the rest of these piers here. And then, yeah, I mentioned we can place actual vehicle props if we go to find it, vehicles tab, and let's get a couple of trucks like this, yeah. Sometimes you'll see just, truck containers like that without an actual motor attached, but let's rotate this. Since that's where the car would actually attach. And we got actual parking there, so looking pretty cool. I think we could do some riprap treatment along here as well now. So we're gonna go to landscaping, rock, and I'm gonna use the line tool, get them nice and close together. Randomize it a bit, a little bit of offset, and let's line the edge here. I'm gonna leave that open because I'm gonna do one more kind of aesthetic pier coming down from the edge there. Yeah, for that, let's get another wooden leisure pier. I don't think we can have this go down. Yeah, it's not respecting my page down command. However, I think we can use move it after the fact. So let's get this out to about there. I'm gonna pause it, hit movement, select that node, and yep, this comes down, perfect. Even disappears into the water. That is lovely. And then we can fill in the gaps with more rock. You know, I was about to add a fence to the edge here, but two things. One, I saw on Google Earth, I'm not really seeing fences on piers like this. I just see the protective rock. But two, it's kind of a pain to have fences along the edge here where the terrain starts to go down. Just to illustrate that point, if we try to add a fence here along the edge, you can see it kind of goes up and down. And for some reason, even move it isn't liking it. So if I pause the game, select the net lane, Control H it to the road, watch closely. See how it jumps up and down? I'm not sure why it's doing that, and that looks a little weird, so I think it's better if we just leave it like that. We'll have a few creative liberties. One more thing though on this pier, I know I'm really just milking this pier out. I want to get like a derelict pier from, way back when. Something where we have the logs in a line getting gradually deeper into the water. So let's have it maybe here. What we'll do is we'll have a newer wooden leisure pier coming out from the pedestrian quay here, but then it's like, it was easier to build the new one than to try to reestablish or rebuild this derelict one. So let's have it come off from here. For that, I'm gonna go to find it, search for, I think just log. There you go, log one, sure, took me forever. And I'm gonna place these in a line. So let's get them like around here. Use the line tool, space them out. I think that should be okay. So we'll have them up to like here. Get two of them in a row. But now I'm gonna, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna manually rotate them and bring them up so they just kind of descend into the water there. Okay, yeah, like that. And then we can even get a few like strewn about that, they were support platforms or something like that, but they just totally collapsed later. And there you go, a derelict pier. Thing looks pretty cool. Definitely glad I found these wooden rubble piles there. Even if we zoom out, we can barely see it. I think that was worth it. So we're gonna say the city developers saw that, did not want to touch it, did not want to get their hands dirty. Cheaper and faster to just build a new one. So let's come from this corner right here, go to our pathways. I'm gonna use this medium one. And I wanna make sure that we don't encroach upon the seaway there, but I think that is good. So now the voters have their pier back. Now, very quickly to finish out the remaining part of this side of the harbor, let's get one more parking lot to kind of mirror the one we have here. And then I'm gonna surround it with factories on either side, since we do have almost full demand for factories, which I guess is kind of always the case. And then from here, we're gonna do like a little riverside park, or I guess coastal park, but let's continue the alleyway up a little farther so we can actually attach park assets to the road here, since they do not, unfortunately, attach to these new quay walls. I'm gonna follow the curvature of the wall here, though. We'll end in a roundabout out there, I think. And I think on this side, we definitely need a dog park here. But I imagine, they have the dog park here if they want to run off leash, or the owners can bring them down to the coast here, and then they can run around in the water there. In fact, let's continue a park path underneath the bridge here. And what in God's name is that? Is that the pillar? Can I better bulldoze that? I can't. Okay, good. Nothing to see there. As I was saying, I'm going to continue a park path underneath the bridge here, and then can wind up to that cul-de-sac there. And then we'll get one more parking lot here, I think, for the park commuters. And as I said, we'll end in a roundabout right there. And finally, we'll continue our little path here. Actually, I might have to do a little terraforming first. And we should be able to fit in 1 or 2 more of these small pocket parks. And then to cover up some of these surfaces, I'll extend the grass we have here, but then we'll get some trees and some bushes to hide the rest of the grass. All right, let's flip to this side of the harbor now. And if my colors all of a sudden look a little different, I was playing around with Lumina to try to avoid the blinding whiteness I get from this surface when the sun's overhead, but I think I failed. So apologies if all of a sudden you can't see the screen because the pavement is just shining brightly right at you. But back to the pier, I'm thinking let's stick with the industrial parking theme, and then of course this will be our lumber yard. First things first, I'm going to extend the alleyway to meet the breakwater out here though. We'll get a few more meters of docking space there, and then we can plop like a storage facility or a factory in this other triangle here. So let's extend the land out. We'll get our alleyway, and instead of going straight into the breakwater at this super sharp angle, and then that left turn would be just basically undoable, let's go out to here, and then we can come from a 90, or add a 90 from the breakwater. So that turn is a little more manageable, and that leaves us some space for another factory or two. So now let's get our concrete strip light and cover all the roads here, and hopefully not blind ourselves in the process. Look at that pure whiteness. Can't see a thing. All right, there you go. One thing I like about the surface, or what I like more than being blinded, is that it lets the train tracks come through, or the tram tracks, I should say. And this kind of tracks what I see in industrial areas, no pun intended, about you don't see cross beams when it's in an industrial area like this. You just see the tracks going through the pavement itself. So I like how that looks. One thing though, this left turn is also very sharp. So let's get a road coming off like that. Triangles within triangles. All right, but now we're set up to zone. So let's get a couple of factories and some parking spots, if I can see the tiles. And then before I forget, I'm gonna get a few more parking decals here and place down some vehicle props just to bring this area a little more to life. We can also get a little bit of sand decals on here to make it seem like they kind of chewed up the earth there. So I'm going to go to our golden sand thick, I think is fine. And we can get this underneath the rock here before going out around here. And to kind of blend this in, then we'll use our sand decals. All right, so we can maybe do a little bit more detailing with this section later, but I think last thing I want to do on this pier is get a little lighthouse. We don't have room to actually zone anything here, but I'm going to use a static poppable of the fire watch house, or fire watchtower maybe? Yeah, fire watchtower. And the static ploppable just means I don't need to actually zone it or anything like that. So let's get this on the very end here. And I think I will place a real firehouse somewhere in Port Angeles, but to make this semi-functional, let's get a warning light on top. And voila, we have a lighthouse. That's the least effective lighthouse in the world, but if we turn off lights, let's see how it looks. Oh yeah, I guess we have the buoys here there, so everything's fine except for the next death wave that is currently hitting the city. Oh well. And so we come to the lumber storage area, and I think it makes sense to keep something like this around even though these tracks aren't in use anymore since, for obvious reasons we're not cutting down trees in Discovery Park. We do have forestry area over in the valley, so if they're shipping out lumber from Port Angeles, they'd need some place to store their excess wood. So what I want to do is use a new alleyway that I made with Road Builder that has a tram track built in, and that's how we're going to justify basically keeping these tram tracks around. So what we're going to do is bring back these right here, and I called it, what else? Tram Alley. I'm going to come off at a 90 from here. So there is a built-in road. That's where the trucks will come to either pick up or drop off lumber. But, the tram was there, so no use in getting rid of it. To clean this up, though, I'm going to convert this last section into a regular alleyway. And in fact, let's create a node around here, we'll say. Convert this section into an alleyway as well. And then we can curve in with the tram track to get this type of curvature we had before. And then we can place down our tram stop to get rid of that notification, and boom, there you go. We got basically the same thing, but now we have truck access, which makes more sense since only trucks will be dropping off lumber here. So let's do the same thing over here. And there you go. So underneath, I'm actually going to get an oil surface because to me, this looks like gravel. Doesn't really look like oil, although I guess I don't really know what oil surfaces look like. So I'm going to spread that all over here. Yeah, and then let's get a little bit of service parking on this end. I'm thinking let's bring out another alleyway straight from here. I'm not going to connect that intersection though, since this is, two arterials coming into an alleyway. That sounds like a crash waiting to happen. So we'll do that, but then I'm going to bring out a pavement surface. Inside, we can get those lumber props I found over when we did the broken down pier, but then we'll get a couple more industrial props along the road here, fence it in, and then dirty it up with some stained decals. Okay, looking gritty. Love it. So I did surround it with a little bit of fences. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a bug, but I cannot say which colors the fences are going to be. So instead of just redoing the fence each time until I get the right color, I think that's fine. I can barely see. And again, fences look pretty bad after the latest patch. So I'm not sure if y'all are seeing that, but this is definitely affecting all of my save files. Interesting. Last thing I want to do though for the lumber storage area is get like the command and control center. So I think we can get just a basic office in the corner of Gardenia Lane. And how pleasant is that name? So I think all the tiles are focused along Daffodil Street there. So let's do our handy dandy pedestrian path trick. And then we'll just do basic low density. Okay, there we go. So chat, all I need from you is a good company name for the lumber company that runs this place. So have at it. Let's fill out the actual town of Port Angeles now. And I'm going for small town vibes here. And in some cases, the best times are behind it. So I'm thinking US Northeastern, commercial and mixed along Daffodil Street and Elmhurst here along the water. Maybe a couple of townhouses along Anchor Lane, but then mostly small single family houses in this grid back here. So first asset I want to plop is the Lobster Tail restaurant, which is a leisure's venue signature building. And I think, for obvious reasons, this restaurant would go really well in a port town. So I'm going to plop it here along the water, right by the ferry and the tram station there. And then I also want to move the police station in this corner here. So I'm gonna break up this block, extend a road from this intersection here into our parking road there. And then let's move this right in the corner. Might as well upgrade it. Get those bonus points, which we clearly need. And then right across the street, I'm going to get a firehouse. And I think a few people have pointed out that this area in the port kind of lacks fire coverage. So, and obviously this is not a real fire watchtower. So I'm going to get the very basic vanilla firehouse right here. Let's plop it across the street. And then I'll make sure that these are actually assigned to the adjacent districts. Cool, and then before I forget, in either corner here, we gotta get some gas stations. I feel like, major junctions like that along the arterials, that is a prime location for a gas station. So let's bring back these key walls. Hopefully I don't destroy the grid with that. Nice. And yeah, we'll just get 2 small gas stations. American, of course. Yikes, what are all these filters? These are new. Where's the American filter? There we go. Okay, let's get some commercial assets now. Okay, so we got the makings of a small port town, sideways cranes, ignoring that, but a couple of more special buildings and service buildings I want to get. First one is definitely a post office. Every small town needs one, and we can barely fit this small post office right in the back there. So let's assign that immediately. And we'll do Port Angeles and the 2 adjacent suburbs, I think. Or I guess this is technically adjacent. And I'm going to fill in these open spots with a little bit more parking. I also want to get the vanilla water tower, which to me just screams small town vibes. In this corner here, then we'll line a couple of factories, but in this corner, I have a special suggestion from a commenter that we'll implement. So first, let's get the vanilla water tower. I'm not using the USA Northeast one because we already have that over in Pacific Heights, right over hill there. So let's attach this in the corner. And then, yeah, let's get 2 small factories right along Elmhurst Street. You could even say there's like a maintenance facility for the water tower, but definitely don't want one that pollutes the water. So let's get a non-polluting variety, I guess. There you go, no smokestack. But okay, in this corner, we're gonna take a suggestion from, and I'm totally gonna butcher this name, Aziamaradziska 3548. I apologize for just completely butchering that, but they pointed out that, hey, Port Angeles was featured in the Twilight films in the books, so let's get a restaurant to pay homage to where Bella and Edward had some Italian dinner. So for that, I'm going to use the Streamline Diner, which is I think a vanilla signature building. Yeah, Streamline Diner. But we're going to turn this into an Italian restaurant. And I think I can just barely fit it in this corner here. We'll have to move the firehouse back a little bit. And per their suggestion, we're going to name this Bella Italia. And you definitely know that we're going to rename that institute, or that medical institute, the Colon Clinic, since the dad vampire was a doctor. Okay, nice. I think in this pocket right here, we can get a nice playground for kids to, you know, watch their parents set sail and go to work. Is that what kids do? I don't know. All right, excellent. We'll fill in the gaps later with some trees, some more surfaces. Might even be able to squeeze in one more parking lot there. Don't want to skimp on parking lot in a small USA town. In the back, though, this is where we're going to get a single or maybe double lane of townhouses. So let's go to our zoning tool and get some northeastern row housing. Don't want one right next to the arterial, I think. And then last, let's get a couple of more parking lots to separate them from everything else, which is going to be single family housing. I think this could be a nice park triangular block as well. For the single family houses, I'm going to hand plot these because if I were to just blanket zone the entire grid here, we would get a bunch of houses of different sizes and orientations, and I think that would look a little weird. So better to make sure that we have, you know, similar sizes, 2x2s, 2x3s, and that they all face the same alleyways. So let's go to find it. And yeah, these are my filters, 2x2s, at level 1. I am going to use a variety of assets though, just to get some, well, yeah, variety. So it's not all the same exact house type. So let's plop these down. All right, so we've got a pretty tight packed grid now, but at least we have a consistent sizing and orientation for all our houses instead of having, you know, like a random 2x5 take up this entire stretch of beach lane, but facing Blue Jay lane when everything else is facing beach lane. Yeah, it's a mess. So let's move on to our park block now. And now that I'm seeing this, I think it makes sense to actually bring the parking lot within the park bounds. So this is like literally a parking lot for the park. So let's get it in this corner here. And that frees up another spot for a house in a second. But the park I have in mind to match the curvature of Blue Jay Street is this playground. So let's get it right in the middle. Lovely. So all we gotta do is get some landscaping, add some trees, and we'll add one more house in that corner. And before I forget, let's zone in this last 1x3 with one just random row house to fill in the parking lot there. So let's look at behind Colon Clinic now. And I think it makes sense to get some more death care because we just added a bunch of people. We will have a death wave any second now, I bet, even though it's morbid to have death care right behind healthcare. Although now that I'm on top of this, like this is annoying me that it's not aligned with the grid there. So I'm gonna pause it. Let's reorient Colon Clinic here. Instead of actually plopping down a crematorium though, which is way too big, and I'm sick of using French crematoriums, let's use the modular service block here. So for that, we're gonna get a static ploppable of a low density office. This one kind of looks like a warehouse of sorts. Let's get in the corner there. We'll go back to death care, plop in our service block. And while we're at it, let's also make this semi-functional with a office block. But if we select our modular zoning block, if I can find it, it is underneath the asset here. Let me temporarily move this, get out of the way, there you are. We can actually add a parking lot for hearses. And I don't believe, oh no, we do select operating districts. So let's make sure we get, I think that's kind of small, so we'll just get Port Angeles here. And now we can move our office back in spot, hide the zoning block there. And actually we got room for maybe one more office here. And then I also want to add a parking lot to the side of the colon clinic because as you can see, there are only 7 spots here. And that is just nowhere near enough for a big clinic like this. All right, it's looking pretty good, and hopefully we'll see these hearses in action soon because we will definitely have a death wave any minute now. But before moving on, I do want to address one comment from Christopher DD6PD, who said we should really get a bigger athletic facility for this high school here, which we're going to name this Port Angeles High. But besides the point, they were saying, yeah, we need like a football field or something like that if we really wanted a proper American suburb. And while I agree, I just don't want to destroy any more housing than I have to right now because we're just in like a perpetual housing crisis. So if we ever come back to redevelop these suburbs, which, hey, we might, I will, make that a priority because, it's always cool to see a big football field for high school students. But for now, housing is priority. So all that's left is a bit of detailing now. And for that, I'm thinking we will finish the rock wall that I completely forgot to do along Elmhurst Street there. Get some landscaping in, trees to fill in the gaps, more services, obviously a bunch of decals, finish the custom tram stop I promised by Discovery Park. And then as part of this time lapse, I am going to zone a bit of coastal Ladera, just so that when the episode's over, our town feels like it's nestled in between 2 suburban hills here. So for that, I'm thinking I'll get a few more commercial assets along Laurel Street, maybe in this corner too by Daffodil Street. And then in the hills itself will be all single-family houses, but more tightly packed together than what I did in Sunrise Hills and the other suburbs here. And I'm a little curious what the land value would be in an area like this because, I mean, we got waterfront access and great views, but you're also next to the oil refinery and fuel plants, so you're breathing in pollution. Yeah, I'm not sure. But to make this a little quicker, I'm only going to go up to Spring Street because I would like to give the waterfront a little more thought in future episodes. As well as zoning towards Portside Commons and our athletic facility out there. So that's the main idea I have. But with that out of the way, let's start detailing. All right, welcome back to the cozy town of Port Angeles, everyone, where currently there is a 3-car pileup burning down our storefronts that we oh so carefully placed. At least the cops are on the scene, and we have the Cullens, no doubt, on their way. So let's do a quick recap of that detailing time lapse before moving on, because after doing that, these are the vibes I was going for. Small town that has definitely seen better times, but nestled in between the hills, hidden away from the big city, so a good getaway if you want to breathe a little ocean air. In terms of detailing, I finished out the rock wall as promised, got some landscaping next to Elmhurst Street there, and then manicured up the tram stop, which I see has the tram, and people are using it. Excellent. I'm guessing they're going to the Park Cafe there, or maybe they work at the pumping station, but at least someone's using it. That's pretty cool. But back to the town itself, did the usual treatment of extending surfaces, stained decals. We do have some hoodlum spraying graffiti though. However, I think Main Street is super cute. Definitely a place I would visit, get some ice cream here or some fish at the Lobster Tail before going out to the pier and just, enjoying the sight of the cargo ships there. And then back in the residential district, filled in the gaps with more trees, more stained decals, the usual. And I did bring back some of these intersections so there weren't as many stoplights along the arterials there. So did a bit of traffic management too. Of course, the biggest addition was everything in Costa Ladera, so tried to make these houses much more packed in, and I think that looks a lot better, as well as using a lot more trees than I did in the other suburbs. And of course, I added way more commercial than I initially planned, so basically, this entire stretch of Laurel Street is a new commercial/office strip, pretty much rivaling what we have in Daffodil. Same for this corner over here by this corner of Daffodil Street. However, yeah, I didn't just want to leave this blank. This is a popular road, so a good place for businesses to pop up, I think. So we're going to end today's episode with a bit of community feedback, but before that, I want to acknowledge that I did not bring out the subway line here, and after building this, I don't know if I want to. I kind of want it to be a little more isolated, even though it's, 2 miles from the city center there. I feel like, yeah, they would not want to be part of the grid here, so TBD if we do bring that branch out. For now, I think we're okay. Plus, we got the ferry line that connects them to the downtown, so it's not like they don't have 0 public transportation options. And again, when we do Vallecito, which I swear I corrected this. Someone said that's with 1 L. But yeah, when we do Vallecito, we'll get a metro stop here and then extend more bus lines. So public transportation is a topic for another day. In terms of community feedback, got a lot of good suggestions, as always, from last episode's build. And the first one is from Scottbot, who said we should upgrade Middle Street here to be a collector for better traffic management, since it kind of connects everything from the National Mall all the way down to Sophia's Wrench. So this used to be an alleyway, and now it is a 2-laner with parking that kind of just cuts all the way through. And I absolutely love this view right here. And 2 birds, 1 stone, upgrading Middle Street, which as you can see kind of loops around, so Middle and Loop Street, upgrading that to one with parking, address some feedback from GeneNeg6004 and Twisted_CPP, who just kind of decried the overall lack of parking in general. Even though these assets technically do have garages, I don't know if people actually use them or if garages are functional in this game. So making sure that we have some more street parking and then adding 1 more parking lot over here by the tunnel. And speaking of, last suggestion was from Lucas Jackal 130, who said we should not have the telecom tower on top of a tunnel because it needs a lot of ground for, deep foundations. So basically, I just swapped where the houses and the telecom tower were. So now the telecom tower is on top of solid ground. But okay, that does it for today's episode, everyone, as the ferry is colliding with the pier there. Thank you as always for watching. If y'all have any suggestions or feedback like what I just went over with our previous build, please let me know in the comments. If y'all have good Lumina settings, or maybe should I just remove Lumina? I'm not sure if the latest patch just basically kind of borked everything, because I feel like things are grainier too. I don't know, the definition of the building seems off. If you're seeing the same thing, let me know in the comments, especially if you have any fixes. But until next time, thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye.